Hi, my name is Daniel and I lead social innovation at the Schwab Foundation and the World Economic Forum. For almost 30 years now, the Schwab Foundation has awarded really outstanding examples of social entrepreneurship around the world. It's now a community of 500 social entrepreneurs that impacts collectively about 1 billion people every year. One such awardee is RLabs, of course, with Renee and Marlon joining our community a few years ago. We work with these social entrepreneurs to introduce them to business leaders, to political leaders, to leaders in civil society, and highlight the solutions that they're bringing, but also highlight how they are staying close to the needs of the community and how society at large can reinvent itself through community support. First of all, I think the outcomes funding market is something that is, in its concept, already mature, but in its application still quite early. With the work that we've done so far, we estimate that the outcomes funding market is about $185 billion worldwide. But a lot of that is driven by public sector funding for specific initiatives, driven by public sector priorities. I think part of the shift that has to happen, which hasn't happened just yet, is to make sure that the communities are in the driver's seat of actually defining what impact is their priority. And I think that's something where RLabs and the work that you're doing and the deep roots that you have in community is just amazing to show how this can then showcase how impact that matters to the community, that matters to each individual, can then be translated into measurable outcomes. Because when we talk about outcomes, we often talk qualitative things, right? You can maybe measure incremental income, you can maybe measure whether somebody has a job and holds it for 6 months. But does it mean that somebody's actually doing better? Does that mean that there's more resilience in the community? We don't really know that yet. And I think that's something where it has to be more recognized for communities to be in a driver's seat for outcomes payments. So first of all, I think a big job that we have to do as an organization that has a global audience and some visibility is to surface these solutions. So in many ways, it's a bit of a job sharing between RLabs actually implementing the solutions, working with the community, and us socializing them and sharing them with people who actually are driving this space, which is part of the reason why we're here for the Outcomes Finance Alliance Summit this year in Cape Town. The other aspect is for RLabs to work together with similar community-driven organizations, which it is doing to some extent also with the Schwab Foundation, to highlight how these community-driven models can actually reinvent how we think about our economy. As we're seeing AI increasingly replacing service-driven jobs and robotics actually increasingly manufacturing our physical goods, it's also a question for us, what's our economy going to look like in the future? What's an economy going to look like where human value is no longer producing physical goods or services? And in this way, there's a lot of wisdom coming out of community-driven organizations where you're actually recreating a whole economic system, but building it on trust and building it on relationships amongst each other. And in some ways, that's the prototype of an economy that we might see at scale in the future. I think the impact measurement field is still evolving in so many ways. We've come a long way already from standardizing and putting some of the impact into metrics over the last decade or two, specifically also growing with the impact investing market. Frameworks like IRIS Plus metrics have really also helped to start the conversation between investors and funders on the same level. At the same time, we're recognizing that not everything that counts can be counted. And that is something that hasn't been solved yet. There's more progress in the field of measuring systems change, for example, which is more qualitative. But there's also some progress in attributing impact to individual stories and highlighting specific cases, specific success cases. but at the same time also highlighting the value of community, the value of belonging. I don't think we have seen the end of impact measurement as it is. I think it's a very new field for organizations like RLabs to also innovate and develop new approaches around. But it's definitely not at a point where impact measurement can truly attribute value to those kinds of factors that are actually at the core of our community work. So we've looked at Slato as a really inspiring case of how we can redefine an economy from the ground up and that is rooted in a community. Based on Slato, we've also developed a white paper on an impact currency. So let's assume that a community currency like Slato could actually be issued by a central bank. Today, about 97% of all money in our hands is created through loans, through lending in the banking system. Let's assume somebody could actually go to the central bank and say, I want to lend money, we call it impact credits, and I want to loan it for the promise of in 3 years paying back an impact that matters to my community. So that person, let's say it's a daycare center, says, I want to build a daycare center and I want to prove that the support I'm giving to families is actually creating positive impact on their lives. Gets an impact credit loan. That loan helps them pay their teachers, pay their nurses, pay their staff. Those staff go actually shopping, buy groceries, and so impact credits start into circulation. 3 years later, that person doesn't pay back in rand or euros or dollars, but it actually pays back in verified outcomes to say, yes, kids actually got support, families got support, and through that, everybody in the community is better off. That way, you really tie and create an economy that is ultimately pegged towards impact. And because you're creating secondary transactions as well, which means that your staff are paying with the impact credits. That money then makes its way into the supermarket. The supermarket is paying its suppliers in impact credits. That permeates throughout the entire economy. Now, the ultimate structure that we've thought about in this case is that communities actually define their priorities. That they know whether they need education, whether they need healthcare, whether they need employment, and through the priorities that the community set, they get a certain amount of verification budgets every year that they can then give to providers. But these providers are no longer businesses. They might be businesses, but in the future they can be civil society organizations, social entrepreneurs, faith-based organizations, so anybody who can credibly create positive impact. And that is, for us, a future vision of how our economy could truly measure what matters to us as the community, but keeps communities in the driver's seat while reinventing the whole economic and financial system.